though the CIA continued to maintain drug experiments in the streets of America, ladies and gentlemen, after the program was officially canceled, the United States reaped tremendous value from it, according to their own testimony. With George Hunter White's connection to underworld figure Little Augie, connections were made with Mafia kingpin Lucky Luciano, who was in Dannemora prison. Luciano wanted freedom. The Mafia wanted drugs, and the United States wanted Sicily. The date was 1943. Augie was the go-between between Luciano and the United States War Department. Lucky Luciano was transferred to a less harsh prison and began to be visited by representatives of the Office of Naval Intelligence and from underworld figures such as Meyer Lansky. A strange, very strange alliance was formed between the United States intelligence agencies and the Mafia, who controlled the West Side docks in New York. And it continues to this very day. Luciano regained active leadership in organized crime in America with the help of those sworn to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The United States intelligence community utilized Luciano's underworld connections in Italy. In July of 1943, Allied forces launched their invasion of Sicily, the beginning push into occupied Europe. General George Patton's 7th Army advanced through hundreds of miles of territory that was fraught with difficulty, booby-trapped roads, snipers, confusing mountain topography, all within close range of 60,000 hostile Italian troops. And all this was accomplished in 4 days. A military miracle, even for General George S. Patton. Senate Estes Kefauver's Senate Subcommittee on Organized Crime asked in 1951 how all this was possible. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, was that the Mafia had helped to protect roads from Italian snipers, served as guides through treacherous mountain terrain, and provided needed intelligence to Patton's army. The part of Sicily which Patton's forces traversed had at one time been completely controlled by the Sicilian Mafia. Under Benito Mussolini smashed it through the force of police repression. Just prior to the invasion, it was hardly even able to continue shaking down farmers and shepherds for protection money. But the invasion changed all this, and the United States of America put the Mafia back into power. And the Mafia went on to play a very prominent and well-documented role in the American military occupation of Italy. The expedients of war opened the doors to American drug traffic and Mafia domination. The partnership between the American intelligence agencies and the underworld has never been shaken. This, you see, was the beginning of the Mafia-United States Intelligence Alliance, an alliance that lasts to this very day and helped to support the covert operations of the Central Intelligence Agency, such as the Iran-Contra operations. In these covert operations, the Central Intelligence Agencies would obtain drugs from South America and Southeast Asia, sell them to the Mafia, and use the money for the covert purchase of military equipment. These operations accelerated when Congress cut off military funding for the Contras. Whenever law enforcement agencies would come close to the source, the supply lines, or the distribution points and network of the drugs, the veil of national security would come down to protect all concerned, including the Mafia. Every sincere effort and investigation into the source of drugs coming into the United States of America have ended up against a solid curtain that has come down in front of the investigators forbidding any further research on their part. That curtain is called the national security. One of the Allies' top occupation priorities in those days was to liberate as many of their own soldiers from garrison duties so that they could participate in the military offensive. In order to accomplish this, Don Caliguero's Mafia were pressed into service, and in July of 1943, the Civil Affairs Control Office of the United States Army appointed him mayor of Villalba and other Mafia officials as mayors of other towns in Sicily. As the northern Italian offensive continued, Allied intelligence became very concerned over the extent to which the Italian communist resistance to Mussolini had driven Italian politics to the left. Community Party membership had doubled between 1943 and 1944. That's Communist Party membership, folks, had doubled between 1943 and 1944. Huge leftist strikes had shut down factories, and the Italian underground fighting Mussolini had risen to almost 150,000 men. By mid-1944, the situation came to a head, and the United States Army terminated arms drops to the Italian resistance and started appointing Mafia officials to occupation administration posts. Mafia groups broke up leftist rallies and reactivated black market operations throughout southern Italy. Now, why did the intelligence community do this instead of dealing with honest, sincere patriots and resistant movement leaders? Simply, folks, there is a rule in intelligence. Remember, I was a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and I know what I'm talking about. There is a rule. And that rule is that you live a life of blackmail. You see, they could blackmail the Mafia leaders. They could threaten them with exposure, arrest. They could pull the rug out from under them at any time they wanted to. But as long as they dealt with them and the Mafia leaders did what they were told, did what they were bidded, they were helped in return. And they were literally handed the country of Italy and the underworld of the United States of America on a silver platter. Now, it worked the other way. Also, ladies and gentlemen, the members of the Mafia had the same blackmail abilities over those who worked with them, their case officers, and the intelligence departments, agencies, and operations who dealt with them. And this gave them great power. Haven't you always wondered how a few hoodlums held such control over so many people and so many cities in this country? Why was it that our law enforcement agencies were unable to properly deal with them? I think it is something that all Americans need to know, need to think about, and we need to begin to put together solutions so that these things can never happen again. Now, 1946. Lucky Luciano was released from prison and deported to Italy, where he rebuilt the heroin trade. The court's decision to release him was made possible by the testimony of intelligence agents at his hearing and a letter written by a naval officer reciting what Luciano had done for the Navy. Luciano was supposed to have served from 30 to 50 years in prison. Over 100 Mafia members were similarly deported within a couple of years. Today, the same alliance goes on between the Mafia and the intelligence community, and now law enforcement agencies are included in this strange marriage. The liaison between them is the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. Has nothing to do with Jews or Judaism, and it has all been documented, and we will get to that, ladies and gentlemen. Luciano set up a syndicate which transported morphine base from the Middle East to Europe, refined it into heroin, and then shipped it into the United States via Cuba. During the 1950s, Marseille in southern France became a major city for the heroin labs, and the Corsican syndicate began to actively cooperate with the Mafia in the heroin trade. And those, as you all know, became popularly known as the French Connection. In 1948, our Captain White visited Luciano and his narcotics associate, Nick Gentile, in Europe. Gentile was a former American gangster who had worked for the Allied military government in Sicily. By this time, the Central Intelligence Agency was already subsidizing Corsican and Italian gangsters to oust communist unions from the port of Marseille. American strategic planners saw Italy and southern France as extremely important for their naval bases as a counterbalance to the growing naval forces of the Soviet Union. CIO AFL organizer Irving Brown testified that by the time the Central Intelligence Agency subsidies were terminated in 1953, United States support was no longer needed because the profits from the heroin traffic was sufficient to sustain operations. Every member of every agency, of every intelligence organization in this country knows every single bit of this, ladies and gentlemen. When Luciano was originally jailed, the United States felt it had eliminated the world's most effective underworld leader, and the activities of the Mafia were seriously damaged. Mussolini had been waging a war since 1924 to rid the world of the Sicilian Mafia. Thousands of Mafia members were convicted of crimes and forced to leave the cities and hide out in the mountains. Mussolini's reign of terror had virtually eradicated the international drug syndicates. Regardless of what you think of his politics, he cleaned up drugs in Italy. Combined with the shipping surveillance during the war years, heroin trafficking had become almost nil. Drug use in the United States before Luciano's release from prison and the strange alliance of the Mafia and the intelligence agencies was on the verge of being entirely wiped out. mind control in America.